You stopped texting, they stopped too, and now there's only silence. No big argument, no goodbye, no final message to bring everything to a close. Just silence sitting between two people who once meant the world to each other. But here's what almost nobody understands about that silence. It isn't empty. It isn't simply the end. In many cases, it's one of the strongest psychological moments both of you are living through right now. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover could completely change the way you see this situation. While you're sitting there wondering if they've already forgotten you, something invisible is already happening beneath the surface. Something is slowly shifting where you can't see it. By the time you reach the end of this, you'll understand what's really going on, why this moment matters so much, and how you can use it to become a stronger version of yourself. Because this isn't only about whether they come back. It's about reconnecting with yourself again, and once that happens, everything starts to look different. The moment both of you fall into complete silence after no contact, that's when the real transformation quietly begins. There isn't always a dramatic ending. There isn't always a long conversation that explains everything. Sometimes the messages simply stop. One day you're talking, and the next day there is nothing. You chose to step back. You decided to protect your peace, regain your confidence, and hold on to your self-respect. Then something unexpected happens. They become silent too. No chasing after you, no apology, no late-night message saying they miss you, just complete quiet. And almost instantly your mind begins creating questions. Did they move on already? Did I ever matter to them? Was I really that easy to replace? But understand this before you let those thoughts take over. This silence is not proof that you've lost. It isn't evidence that they never cared. It's the beginning of something much deeper than most people ever recognize. This is where genuine psychological change quietly starts, even though neither of you can fully see it yet. Keep watching, because what happens next is where everything begins to shift. Most people misunderstand what silence really means. They assume that when someone stops talking, it automatically means they no longer care. They convince themselves the feelings disappeared overnight and the story is over. But real life rarely works that way. Silence, especially when both people choose it, often means the emotions have become too complicated to express. Sometimes the feelings are so heavy that neither person knows the right words anymore. When two people step away at the same time, countless emotions continue moving beneath the surface without anyone noticing. If there were truly nothing left inside, there wouldn't be those quiet moments where they almost send a message before stopping themselves. There wouldn't be nights when your name suddenly appears in their thoughts for no obvious reason. There wouldn't be those unexpected memories showing up while they're driving, working, or trying to focus on something else. Real silence carries tension. It carries unanswered questions. It holds emotions that neither of you has fully processed yet. That's why silence often feels so uncomfortable. It forces both people to sit with thoughts they can no longer escape. So don't automatically confuse their silence with indifference. Instead, recognize what it often represents. An emotional storm taking place behind closed doors, a battle happening inside their mind that you were never meant to witness, at least not right now. Sometimes the loudest emotions are the ones that never become words, and that hidden struggle can be far more powerful than anything spoken out loud. Now here's where things become even more interesting. Once both people remain silent, a very common psychological process usually begins inside the other person's mind. It doesn't happen overnight. It unfolds little by little, layer after layer, revealing emotions they didn't even realize they were carrying. The first stage is almost always controlled by pride. During this phase, the ego steps into the driver's seat. They tell themselves, I'm not going to be the first one to reach out. If I truly mattered, they would contact me first. They repeat this idea over and over because it protects them from feeling vulnerable. On the outside, they may seem perfectly fine. They might spend more time with friends, post pictures showing they're enjoying life, or appear happier than ever. To anyone watching, it can look like they've completely moved on without looking back, but appearances can be misleading. Much of that confidence is temporary. It's more like a shield than genuine healing. Pride is loud in the beginning because it tries to cover uncertainty, yet pride cannot hold its position forever. Eventually, reality starts breaking through the walls the ego built. No matter how hard someone tries to ignore certain emotions, the truth slowly finds its way to the surface. And while they're spending energy protecting their pride, something equally important is taking place on your side of the silence, whether you notice it or not. While they are caught up in protecting their ego, your own silence begins serving a completely different purpose. It becomes a place where growth quietly happens. Day by day, your emotions begin settling. The constant anxiety slowly loses its grip. Your thoughts become less chaotic. You start seeing the relationship more clearly, instead of only through pain. Little by little, the version of yourself that depended on constant communication begins standing on its own again. This isn't about waiting for someone to return. This is about rebuilding the parts of yourself that were forgotten while you focus so much on someone else. Every day you remain committed to your peace. Your confidence grows stronger without needing anyone else's approval. The person you are becoming during this period will not be the same person who first entered no contact. That version of you reacted from fear. The new version starts responding from strength. That's why your silence has value. It creates space for healing that constant conversation never could. So whenever you feel tempted to break the silence simply because you feel lonely, pause for a moment and remind yourself of what's actually happening. You're not losing pieces of yourself. You're recovering them. You're becoming calmer, wiser, more emotionally balanced. And whether they realize it today or weeks from now, the quiet confidence you develop during this season becomes something they can eventually sense, even without a single word being spoken. As time keeps moving forward, the pride stage slowly begins to weaken. Another emotion quietly takes its place: curiosity. It rarely arrives with a dramatic moment. Instead, it grows through small questions that become harder and harder to ignore. They begin wondering why they haven't heard anything from you. They notice that you're no longer showing up the way you used to. They start paying closer attention to your online activity, your last seen, your stories, or even the absence of them. Not because they're trying to play a game, but because your silence created an empty space inside their routine. And the human mind naturally wants to fill empty spaces. Questions begin multiplying. What are you doing now? Are you happier without them? Have you already moved on? Did you meet someone new? Are you finally finding peace? Every question without an answer quietly pulls their attention back toward you. That's the strange power of silence. It invites imagination to do the work that constant communication never allowed. When people no longer have information, they begin creating possibilities in their own minds. And those possibilities often become stronger than reality itself. Your silence slowly becomes a mirror, reflecting not only your absence, but also the emotions they kept trying to avoid all along. That's why silence can become so much louder than words ever were. Without your words, your replies, or your emotional reactions, they're suddenly left alone with nothing except their own thoughts. And for many people, that's one of the hardest places to be. It feels uncomfortable. Sometimes it even feels frightening, because while you were still talking, even during the difficult days, you were giving them something to focus on: your attention, your emotions, your energy. Every conversation became something that kept their mind occupied. Now all of that has disappeared, and in the empty space you've left behind, they're forced to face themselves. That's the part most people never expect. Before the silence, it was easy for them to focus on what you were doing instead of looking inward. They could react to your messages, analyze your tone, think about your behavior instead of dealing with their own emotions. But once the conversation ends, that distraction disappears. Suddenly there's nothing left to hide behind. Only their own thoughts growing louder every day. Stay with me, because this next part explains why silence becomes so powerful. The mind naturally fills empty spaces. When there are no new conversations, it starts replaying old ones. When there are no fresh memories, it reaches back into the past looking for answers. And those answers rarely arrive in the way people expect. Instead of finding relief, they often discover emotions they spent weeks or even months trying to avoid. That's why silence feels so heavy. It removes every distraction until the only voice left is the one inside their own mind. And that voice has a way of revealing truths that constant communication kept buried. As those quiet moments continue, something interesting starts happening inside their memory. They don't spend all their time thinking about the biggest arguments or dramatic moments. Instead, it's often the smallest details that begin returning again and again. The little things that once seemed ordinary suddenly become impossible to ignore. They remember how you showed up for them without being asked. They remember the quiet kindness you offered when they were struggling. They remember the patience you gave during moments when almost anyone else would have walked away. They begin thinking about the effort you made, even when you were emotionally exhausted yourself. Those simple moments, once pushed into the background, slowly move to the front of their mind, and they don't appear only once, they repeat, again and again. Every replay carries a little more weight than the one before. This is usually where regret quietly begins. Not with dramatic tears or instant realization, but with small emotional moments that slowly build over time. It happens late at night when they glance at their phone and notice there's still nothing from you. It happens early in the morning before the noise of the day begins. It appears during ordinary moments when life becomes quiet enough for their emotions to catch up with them. That's when the realization starts settling in. Maybe they didn't appreciate your consistency enough. Maybe they overlooked everything you quietly gave. Maybe no one else made them feel understood in the same way you did. In those moments, your absence begins carrying more emotional weight than your presence ever seemed to. This is exactly where many people misunderstand the purpose of no contact. They think it's simply a strategy designed to make someone return. They treat it like a trick or a game with one goal in mind. But that's not where its real strength comes from. The true power of no contact has never been about controlling another person. It's about changing the relationship you have with yourself. When you step away without begging, without trying to explain yourself one last time, without sending another emotional message hoping for a response, you're making a quiet decision that speaks louder than words ever could. You're saying that your peace matters. You're showing that your self-respect is worth protecting. And that's real strength. Not because it's easy, but because very few people actually do it. Most continue reaching out. They keep hoping one more conversation will fix everything. They keep chasing answers that never truly satisfy them. Without realizing it, they slowly give away their own emotional balance. But when you leave with dignity, without creating drama or demanding attention, something shifts. You communicate confidence without saying a single word. That quiet confidence often surprises people because it isn't what they expected. They expected another message, another emotional conversation, another chance to stay in control of the situation. When none of that happens, their expectations collapse. And the distance between what they imagined you would do and what you actually chose becomes the beginning of a powerful psychological shift. As more time passes, another unexpected change quietly begins. The emotional roles slowly reverse. In the beginning, you may have felt like the one who lost everything, the one who cared more, the one left sitting with all the unanswered questions. But little by little, that feeling starts fading. Your mind becomes calmer, your breathing feels lighter. The emotional pressure that once followed you every day slowly disappears. You begin remembering who you were before this relationship consumed so much of your attention. You reconnect with interests that had been forgotten. You enjoy conversations again without constantly checking your phone. Life slowly starts rebuilding itself around you, stronger than before. While that's happening, something different is unfolding on their side of the silence. The absence becomes more noticeable. The attachment they assumed would disappear overnight doesn't vanish as quickly as they expected. That's because real emotional bonds usually fade slowly, especially when there was no real closure. They begin missing your presence, the comfort you brought, the familiar feeling of having you there. Not necessarily because they've completely changed overnight, but because they no longer have access to what once felt normal. Human nature often works this way. We sometimes overlook what's always available, yet deeply notice its value once it's gone. That's why your absence gradually becomes more difficult for them to ignore, even if they never admit it out loud. But here's something that confuses almost everyone. Even after all these emotions begin building inside them, many people still never reach out. At first, that makes no sense. How can someone miss you, think about you, even regret losing you, and still choose silence? The answer is usually much deeper than people realize. Pride gets involved, fear steps in. Shame becomes another wall. Contacting you would mean admitting they made mistakes. It would mean risking rejection. It would mean facing the possibility that you've already found happiness without them. For someone who always needs to feel in control, that's an incredibly difficult position. So instead of acting, they wait. They convince themselves that if you truly cared, you would be the first one to break the silence. They create explanations that protect them from feeling vulnerable. But beneath every excuse sits the same emotion, Fear. Fear of being rejected. Fear of opening their heart. Fear of admitting they still care more than they wanted to believe. That's why they remain frozen. Not because they feel nothing, but because they feel more than they know how to handle. And here's the twist that catches almost everyone by surprise. The most powerful part of this silence isn't the silence itself. It's what they slowly begin noticing as they watch your life from a distance. They start realizing something they never expected. You're not falling apart, you're not waiting, you're not broken. And that realization changes everything. You're not sitting there waiting for them to return and magically fix everything. You're not frozen in time hoping one message will bring your happiness back. Little by little, you're living your life again. You're growing. You're becoming calmer, stronger, more balanced and more focused than you've been in a long time. You're slowly becoming someone who no longer needs another person to rescue them. And believe it or not, that's the realization that often hits the hardest. In their mind, they had built a certain story, a version of reality where they believed they were the center of your happiness, where they assumed you couldn't truly be okay without them, where they believed your world depended on what they chose to give or withhold. But when your life quietly proves that story wrong day after day, something inside them begins to shift. Their ego struggles with that reality because accepting that someone is doing well without you isn't easy. It challenges the protective beliefs people create about themselves. Suddenly, your growth becomes undeniable proof that they were never the only reason you smiled. Life kept moving, you kept healing, you became stronger than they ever imagined. And once that picture forms in their mind, it's very difficult to erase. Stay with me because this next part matters even more. The strongest message you ever send isn't through another text. It's through the peaceful life you continue building while saying nothing at all. That quiet confidence speaks in ways words never could. Now let's bring the attention back to you, because your journey during this silence is just as important as anything happening inside their mind. There will absolutely be difficult days. Days when the silence feels incredibly heavy. Days when every part of you wants to send a message just to make the uncomfortable feeling disappear. Maybe you'll hear a familiar song. Maybe you'll drive past a place that reminds you of them. Maybe an old memory will appear without warning. Suddenly the distance between you feels almost impossible to carry. In those moments, your mind starts whispering the same idea over and over. Just send one message. Just check how they're doing. Just say something small. But here's what you need to remember. That urge isn't always coming from love. It isn't always about real connection. Most of the time, it's your nervous system searching for quick relief from emotional discomfort. It wants the anxiety to stop. It wants certainty. And yes, reaching out might give you temporary comfort. Maybe for a few minutes. Maybe for an hour. But after that, the same emotional cycle usually begins all over again. The progress you've quietly built becomes harder to protect. The strength you've been developing loses momentum. The healthier version of yourself has to climb the same mountain again. That's why remaining silent during your hardest moments isn't weakness. It's one of the clearest forms of self-respect you can practice. Every time you choose peace instead of panic, you're becoming someone emotionally stronger than you were yesterday. There's another part of this process that many people never fully recognize. Your healing isn't happening only inside your emotions. It's happening inside your body too. When you've spent months in a stressful relationship or an emotionally confusing situation, your nervous system becomes used to tension. You stay alert without even realizing it. You're constantly waiting for another mixed signal, another confusing conversation, another emotional disappointment. Over time, that constant pressure becomes normal. It affects your sleep, your focus, your energy. It keeps your body prepared for emotional danger even when nothing is happening. But when communication finally stops, something remarkable begins. Your system slowly starts calming down. Your breathing becomes deeper. Your muscles relax. Your mind doesn't have to stay on constant alert anymore. You're no longer preparing for another emotional impact every single day. As that calm continues growing, your thinking becomes much clearer. You begin seeing the relationship with fresh eyes instead of through emotional attachment. The warning signs you once ignored become easier to recognize. The unhealthy patterns you kept excusing finally make sense. The things you accepted simply because you loved them become impossible to overlook. That clarity may not always feel comfortable, but it gives you something incredibly valuable. It gives you truth. Not the truth shaped by fear, hope, or loneliness, but the truth exactly as it is. And once you see it clearly, it becomes much harder to return to the version of yourself that accepted less than you deserved. Then one day, without any dramatic announcement, something quietly changes inside you. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no magical morning where everything suddenly feels perfect. Instead, the change arrives in small moments. An hour goes by without thinking about them. Then an entire morning. Then maybe a whole day. You laugh with someone and realize it feels completely natural. You make plans for the future without wondering whether they'll be part of it. You wake up one morning and notice they aren't the first thought in your mind anymore. That's when something important clicks into place. It doesn't mean you've erased the memories. It doesn't mean you never cared. It simply means you've grown beyond the pain that once controlled you. The stronger version of yourself begins stepping forward. The person who no longer depends on constant reassurance. The person who doesn't make themselves smaller just to keep someone else comfortable. The person who refuses to exchange their self-worth for attention or temporary affection. That version of you didn't suddenly appear from nowhere. It was always there beneath the fear and uncertainty. Silence simply created enough space for that person to finally rise. And once you experience that kind of inner strength, you realize you've gained something much bigger than the relationship you once thought you couldn't live without. Underneath everything we've talked about is a truth that many people spend years trying to understand. Your value was never decided by whether someone recognized it. Your worth never became smaller because another person failed to appreciate you. You didn't become less important simply because someone couldn't fully see what you brought into their life. You were already enough. This relationship, this silence, this distance, none of it changed your value. It only revealed it more clearly. Sometimes people enter your life to help you discover your strength by walking away. Sometimes they teach you your worth precisely because they failed to recognize it. And when they choose silence while you choose to remain grounded in your own silence, you're doing something much bigger than protecting your peace. You're choosing yourself with quiet confidence. You're building a foundation inside yourself that doesn't depend on another person's approval. Whether they return carrying regret and understanding or whether they disappear forever into another chapter of life, it doesn't change the person you're becoming. Your growth continues either way. Because the biggest truth about no contact was never about bringing someone back into your life. It was always about bringing yourself back. Sometimes they do return with clearer eyes and a deeper understanding of what they lost. If that day ever comes, you'll meet it from a place of strength because you did the inner work. And sometimes they never return at all. The silence simply becomes the final chapter. Even then you still win, because you didn't beg, you didn't abandon your dignity. You chose yourself, and that's a victory no one can ever take away. You didn't lose yourself trying to keep hold of someone who wasn't choosing you. You didn't give up your self-respect just to keep the connection alive for a little longer. Instead, you stood your ground, quietly, calmly, without needing to prove anything. And that decision is worth far more than anything another person could have offered you. That's the part many people don't see right away. Real strength doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it looks like saying nothing at all while continuing to move forward with your life. Stay with me, because this final part may be the most important lesson of all. This journey through silence is never perfectly smooth. It isn't a straight road where every day feels easier than the last. Some mornings you'll wake up feeling lighter, almost peaceful, surprised by how calm your mind has become. Then, without warning, another day will arrive where old memories come rushing back, the questions return. The what-ifs begin filling your thoughts. The moments you shared replay in your mind like scenes from a movie you've already watched 100 times. There may be evenings when the loneliness feels louder than usual, and every part of you wants one more conversation, one more answer, one more chance to fix what already ended. Those moments are real, they're human, but they don't mean you're moving backward, they simply mean you're healing. Growth isn't about never feeling pain again. It's about learning not to let that pain decide your next step. When those difficult moments appear, remind yourself of one simple truth. Every single time you choose not to break the silence, you're making a decision that reaches far beyond today. You're choosing growth instead of temporary comfort. You're choosing lasting healing over quick emotional relief. You're choosing to build a stronger life instead of searching for a short escape from pain. And that choice matters more than you probably realize right now. It may not feel dramatic in the moment. Nobody applauds you for resisting the urge to send that message. Nobody sees the internal battle you quietly win. But those small victories slowly become the foundation of a completely different life.